Machines flatlined as her husband stood in the hallway, wiring their life savings to his mistress. Madeline bled out on the delivery table, clutching her swollen belly, vowing ruthless revenge with her dying breath. Suddenly, her eyes snapped open. Labor hadn't even started yet. It was time to rewrite. Directly history. The fluorescent lights of St. Jude's Memorial Hospital buzzed with a sickening, relentless hum. It was a severely underfunded public clinic on the outskirts of the city, a place where the halls always smelled faintly of bleach and despair. Sydney lay on a narrow, rock-hard bed in the crowded triage ward, her body racked by another agonizing contraction. She was 39 weeks pregnant, and something was terribly wrong. "Deep breaths, Mrs. Hayes," Nurse Fiona said, her voice tight with thinly veiled panic as she checked the fetal heart monitor. The steady thump-thump of the baby's heartbeat had turned into a sluggish, erratic rhythm. "We need to get you into emergency surgery now. You're experiencing a placental abruption. You are hemorrhaging." Sydney gasped, her fingers digging violently into the thin, scratchy bedsheets. The pain was unlike anything she had ever felt, a tearing, blinding agony that radiated from her spine to her abdomen. Where is Harrison?" she choked out, cold sweat dripping into her eyes. "I've paged him 3 times, Dr. Gregory, the attending physician, said grimly as he burst through the curtain. "We cannot proceed to the private surgical suite without his financial consent signature. Your insurance doesn't cover this emergency tier, and the hospital requires a deposit for the blood bank reserves. Where is your husband?" Sydney forced her heavy eyelids open and turned her head toward the glass window of the triage room. Out in the chaotic hallway, standing near a vending machine, was Harrison. He was impeccably dressed in his tailored navy suit, looking entirely out of place in the grim hospital corridor. He wasn't looking at her room. He wasn't pacing with worry. He was smiling at his phone. With a surge of adrenaline born of pure terror, Sydney strained to hear. The triage door was propped open a few inches, and Harrison's loud, self-assured voice drifted through the gap, cutting through the hospital noise like a jagged knife. "Yes, Vanessa, I know," Harrison laughed softly. "I just wired the 85,000. The funds should be in your account within the hour. Your luxury boutique is going to have the most spectacular grand opening in the city." Sydney's heart stopped. The monitor beside her let out a frantic, high-pitched warning beep, but she couldn't hear it over the roaring in her ears. $85,000. That was her money. It was the inheritance her late grandmother had left her, the money Sydney had explicitly set aside for their child's future. Harrison had insisted on moving it to their joint business account just weeks ago, claiming his tech startup needed temporary liquidity to survive the quarter. He had also insisted they use this rundown, public hospital for the delivery to save cash for the baby's college fund. He had lied. All of it was a lie. He had forced his pregnant wife to endure labor in a substandard, dangerous facility just so he could steal her inheritance to fund his mistress's vanity project. "No, don't worry about Maddie," Harrison's voice continued, utterly devoid of warmth. "She's just being dramatic. Women do this all the time. First babies take forever. I'll stay here for optics, but I'll see you tonight at the launch party." "Harrison," Sydney whispered, the word tasting like copper on her tongue as more blood soaked the sheets beneath her. She tried to scream his name, to demand he come inside and save his child, but her lungs refused to fill with air. Dr. Gregory cursed loudly. "We're losing her. Get the crash cart. Forget the paperwork. Wheel her to OR3. Now!" But it was too late. The edges of Sydney's vision were already darkening, closing in like a velvet curtain. She felt a horrifying coldness spreading from her chest, freezing the blood in her veins. Her hands, resting weakly on her swollen stomach, felt the precise moment her baby stopped moving. The absolute stillness of death. As the doctors frantically pumped her chest and shouted medical codes, Sydney stared through the glass one last time. Harrison had turned his back to her room, putting his phone in his pocket, completely oblivious to the fact that his wife and unborn child were dying inches away. If I ever get another chance, Sydney thought, her soul burning with a dark, suffocating rage as the final sliver of light faded from her eyes. I will destroy you. The heart monitor emitted one long, continuous wail. Then there was only darkness. Sydney gasped, her back arching off the mattress as she sucked in a massive, ragged breath of air. She threw her hands over her stomach, expecting to feel the slick warmth of her own blood, expecting the blinding pain of the placental abruption. Instead, she felt the smooth, soft cotton of her expensive maternity pajamas. Her stomach was still swollen, tight, and very much alive. A tiny rhythmic kick fluttered against her palm. The baby. Sydney blinked against the harsh morning sunlight streaming through the sheer curtains. She wasn't in the grim triage room of St. Jude's. She was in her own bedroom, in the upscale suburban home she shared with Harrison. Trembling, she reached for the nightstand and grabbed her phone. October 14th. 7 a.m. It was the morning of her delivery. She had died. She had felt her soul tear away from her body, felt the overwhelming grief of losing her child. And yet here she was. The universe had rewound the clock. It had given her a second chance. A dull, familiar ache tightened across her lower abdomen. Early labor. It was starting exactly as it had the first time. The bathroom door opened, and Harrison walked out. He looked exactly as he had in her final moments, sharply dressed in that tailored navy suit, adjusting his silk tie, his phone already in his hand. "Maddie, I know you said you're feeling some twinges this morning," Harrison said, not even making eye contact with her via the mirror. "But I have to meet the Miller investors. This is a make-or-break meeting for the startup. If the pain gets worse, just take an Uber to St. Jude's. I'll meet you there when I can." In her previous life, this was the exact moment Sydney had broken down. She had cried, begged him to stay, and pleaded with him not to leave her alone while she was so terrified. Her tears had annoyed him, but he had stayed just long enough to drive her to the run-down clinic himself, playing the role of the dutiful husband before abandoning her in the waiting room to talk to Vanessa. This time, Sydney felt no fear. She felt no love for the man standing in front of her. She looked at his perfectly styled hair, his expensive watch, bought with her money, and felt nothing but absolute freezing contempt. She leaned back against the headboard, her face a mask of serene indifference. "Fine. Go." Harrison paused, his hands freezing on his tie. He blinked, clearly thrown off by her lack of emotion. He had expected a fight. He thrived on making her feel needy and unreasonable. You're sure? You don't want me to drop you off?" "I said go, Harrison," Sydney replied, her voice eerily calm, devoid of any warmth. "Don't let me keep you from your investments." Harrison narrowed his eyes slightly, sensing something was off, but his relief at avoiding a screaming match quickly won out. "Right, well, call me if the contractions get closer." He grabbed his briefcase and walked out the door without looking back. The second she heard the front door click shut, Sydney threw off the blankets. She ignored the tightening cramp in her stomach and practically threw herself at her desk. She flipped open her laptop and immediately navigated to their joint banking portal. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. In her past life, Harrison had wired the $85,000 to Vanessa's business account at exactly 11:30 a.m., right as Sydney's condition had started to crash. It was barely 7:15 a.m. now. She logged in. Available balance: $112,450. The money was still there. Sydney didn't just take the $85,000. She navigated to the transfer page and initiated a wire for $110,000, leaving exactly enough to keep the account open so Harrison wouldn't get an immediate closure alert. She routed the funds directly into a secure, private offshore trust that her older brother, Bradley, had set up for her years ago before she and Harrison had married. Harrison didn't even know the trust existed. Submit. The screen loaded, a small green check mark appearing. Transfer successful. Sydney let out a shaky breath, a ruthless smile playing on her lips. "Happy grand opening, Vanessa," she whispered to the empty room. Next, she picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in almost a year. Harrison had systematically isolated her from her family, convincing Sydney that her wealthy, protective brother Bradley was toxic and trying to control her. In her first life, she had believed Harrison's lies. The phone rang twice before a deep, frantic voice answered. "Maddie, is everything okay?" "Brad," Sydney said, her voice finally breaking as the emotional weight of her past life crashed into her. "You were right about all of it. You were right about Harrison." "Where are you?" Bradley demanded, his tone instantly shifting from surprised to commanding. "Are you hurt?" "I'm at the house. Brad, my water is going to break soon, and I am not going to that slaughterhouse clinic he picked out," Sydney said, tears of relief pricking her eyes. "I need you." "I'm 10 minutes away. Pack nothing. I'll buy you whatever you need," Bradley said. The line went dead. Exactly 9 minutes later, a sleek black SUV tore into the driveway. Bradley, towering and impeccably dressed, burst through the front door. He didn't ask questions. He took one look at Sydney's pale face, scooped her up into his arms, and carried her out to the waiting car. "We're bypassing the local hospitals," Bradley instructed his driver as he settled Sydney into the plush leather back seat. He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Dr. Gregory at Cedars-Sinai. I have them on retainer for the VIP maternity wing. You are going to have the best care in the state, Maddie. I've got at you. Dr. Gregory." The name sent a brief shudder through Sydney, but she remembered the doctor hadn't been the problem in her past life. The lack of funding and Harrison's absence had been. At a premium hospital like Cedars-Sinai, with unlimited resources, she and her baby would be safe. By 9 a.m., Sydney was settled into a sprawling, private luxury suite at Cedars-Sinai that looked more like a 5-star hotel than a hospital room. She was hooked up to state-of-the-art monitors. An epidural had completely erased the pain of the contractions. She was safe, hydrated, and surrounded by a team of top-tier medical professionals. Meanwhile, across town, Harrison was sitting in a high-end French cafe with Vanessa. Vanessa, a striking woman with perfectly manicured nails and an insatiable appetite for other people's money, was scrolling through luxury catering options on her tablet. "Are you absolutely sure the wire is going through this morning, Harry? The real estate agent needs the deposit for the boutique space by noon, or we lose the lease." "Relax, V," Harrison chuckled, sipping his espresso. "I told you it's handled. Maddie's money is sitting right in my joint account. I'll do the transfer right now to give you peace of mind." He pulled out his phone, a smug, arrogant smile on his face. He opened his banking app, fully expecting to see the 6-figure balance. He tapped the screen to authenticate his face. The screen loaded. Available balance, $2,450. Harrison blinked. He rubbed his eyes, assuming it was a glitch. He refreshed the app. Available balance, $2,450. His stomach dropped out. A cold, nauseating sweat broke out across his forehead. He frantically tapped into the transaction history. There it was, in stark black and white. At 7:17 a.m., a wire transfer of $110,000 had been authorized and completed from Sydney's IP address. "Harry?" Vanessa asked, noting his sudden pallor. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." The money," Harrison stammered, his hands shaking violently as he stared at the screen. "It's gone." "What do you mean, it's gone?" Vanessa's sweet demeanor vanished instantly, her voice dropping into a harsh hiss. "You promised me that money, Harrison. If I don't pay that lease today, I am ruined." Harrison didn't hear her. Panic, thick and suffocating, seized his throat. He immediately dialed Sydney's number. It went straight to voicemail. She had blocked him. He threw some cash on the table, ignoring Vanessa's shrieks, and sprinted to his car. She must be at St. Jude's, he thought frantically. She went into labor. She panicked. She moved the money. "I just need to get to the hospital, calm her down, and force her to reverse the wire." He broke 3 traffic laws, getting to the run-down public clinic. He burst through the emergency room doors, demanding to see his wife, ready to unleash a torrent of gaslighting and manipulation to get his hands back on that cash. "Sydney Hayes," he shouted at the receptionist. "She was admitted this morning. Where is she?" The receptionist slowly typed the name into the outdated computer system, popping her gum loudly. "Nobody here by that name, sir. No Sydney Hayes has checked in today." Harrison stumbled back, the bustling hospital lobby suddenly spinning around him. His pregnant wife was missing. His mistress was furious. And the money, his ticket to his new life, was entirely gone. For the first time in his life, Harrison realized he had completely lost control. And Sydney was just getting started. Harrison paced the length of his lavish living room, his hands tearing through his perfectly styled hair. It was early afternoon, and his meticulously crafted life was rapidly unraveling. Vanessa had blocked his number after an explosive screaming match in the cafe parking lot, declaring their relationship over unless he produced the $85,000 by midnight. Worse, he had entirely missed the Miller investor meeting. His phone was currently flooded with angry voicemails from his business partners, warning him that the startup was now dangerously close to bankruptcy. But none of that mattered right now. He needed to find Sydney. He needed her inheritance. Desperation clawed at his chest as he tore through the house, searching for any clue. His eyes landed on Sydney's tablet, left carelessly on the kitchen island. He grabbed it, his fingers fumbling as he opened the location-sharing app they had installed years ago for emergencies. He prayed she hadn't disabled it. The screen loaded, a small blue dot blinking against the digital map. Harrison's breath hitched. She wasn't at a cheap clinic. The GPS pin was hovering directly over Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, the most exclusive, expensive hospital in the state. "How?" Harrison whispered to the empty room. Cedars-Sinai required massive upfront deposits or elite insurance coverage, neither of which Sydney had access to without his approval. Unless someone else was paying. A cold spike of dread pierced his stomach. Bradley. Harrison sprinted to his car, the engine roaring as he sped toward the city. The entire drive, he rehearsed his lines. He would play the frantic, worried husband. He would cry. He would manipulate Sydney into feeling guilty for abandoning him, blame pregnancy hormones for her erratic financial behavior, and isolate her from her brother. It had always worked before. Sydney was soft, forgiving, and easily controlled. He just needed 5 minutes alone with her. When Harrison burst through the pristine, glass-paneled doors of the Cedars-Sinai FIV-IP maternity ward, the contrast to St. Jude's was staggering. There was no smell of bleach, no screaming patients in the hallways. Soft instrumental music played from hidden speakers, and the air smelled faintly of lavender. "I need to see my wife, Sydney Hayes," Harrison demanded, slamming his hands down on the polished mahogany reception desk. "She was admitted this morning. I am the father." The receptionist, a severe-looking woman in tailored scrubs, did not flinch. "I'm sorry, sir. Mrs. Hayes is listed as a private patient under strict security protocols. She is not accepting any visitors who are not on her pre-approved list. Your name is not on the list." "Listen to me," Harrison growled, his sophisticated veneer cracking, revealing the desperate, ugly truth beneath. "I am her husband. You cannot legally keep me from my child. Tell me what room she is in right now, or I am calling the police and suing this hospital into the ground." "You won't be suing anyone, Harrison. You can't even afford your own car payments." Harrison froze. The deep, booming voice echoed through the quiet waiting area. He turned slowly, his blood running cold. Standing at the entrance of the VIP hallway was Bradley, flanked by 2 massive, expressionless private security guards. Bradley looked terrifyingly calm, wearing a sharp charcoal suit, his arms crossed over his broad chest. "Bradley," Harrison stammered, attempting to summon his usual arrogant smirk, though his voice trembled. "What are you doing here? Where is my wife? You have no right to interfere in our marriage." "Your marriage ended the moment you tried to use my sister's life savings to fund Vanessa's boutique while sending Sydney to a slaughterhouse clinic," Bradley said, his voice deadly quiet but carrying across the lobby. "She knows everything, Harrison. The money, the mistress, the lies, all of it." Harrison felt the floor drop out from under him. The color drained from his face, leaving him a sickening shade of gray. That's insane. She's delusional. Pregnancy hormones are making her paranoid. I need to see her. I can explain." "There is nothing to explain," Bradley said, taking a step forward, his eyes burning with protective fury. "Sydney delivered a perfectly healthy baby boy an hour ago. She is safe, she is resting, and she never wants to see your face again. If you take one more step toward those doors, these gentlemen will physically remove you, and I will personally ensure you spend the rest of the week eating through a straw." Panic, pure and unfiltered, consumed Harrison. His mind raced frantically, trying to find a loophole, a way to spin this disaster. If Sydney knew everything, the money was gone forever. His startup was dead. Vanessa was gone. He was ruined. Suddenly, the heavy wooden doors to the VIP wing swung open. A nurse stepped out, looking directly at Bradley. "Mr. Sterling, your sister is awake. She says she wants to see him. Just for 2 minutes." Bradley frowned, his jaw clenching tightly. He clearly disapproved, but he nodded. He turned back to Harrison, his eyes narrowing into cold slits. 2 minutes. If you raise your voice, I will break your jaw." Harrison practically shoved past Bradley, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. This was his chance. He could fix this. He pushed open the door to room 1, stepping into the massive, sunlit suite. Sydney was sitting up in the plush hospital bed, looking radiant and entirely untouched by the exhaustion of labor. Cradled in her arms was a tiny, sleeping bundle wrapped in a soft white blanket. The absolute peace in the room was a stark, jarring contrast to the chaotic misery of the life she had escaped just hours ago. Harrison fell to his knees beside the bed, tears instantly springing to his eyes as he activated his most potent weapon, his charm. Maddie. Oh my God, Maddie, I was so terrified. I went to the other clinic and you weren't there. I thought I had lost you. Please, sweetheart, whatever Bradley told you, it's a lie. I love you. Sydney did not look at him. She didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't reach out to comfort him as she always had in the past. She continued to gently stroke her newborn son's cheek, her face a mask of serene, terrifying indifference. Vanessa called me, Sydney said softly, her voice echoing loudly in the quiet room. Harrison choked on a sob, freezing in place. What? Yes. About 20 minutes ago, Sydney continued, finally shifting her gaze to look down at him. Her eyes were cold, hollow, devoid of any affection. Apparently, when you missed her deadline, she assumed you were ignoring her. She found my number online. She was very upset about a commercial lease. She told me everything about the $85,000. She even sent me the receipts of the jewelry you bought her with my credit card last month. Maddie, she's crazy. She's an obsessed stalker, I swear to you, Harrison begged, reaching out to grab her hand. Sydney pulled her hand back violently, her eyes flashing with a sudden, vicious intensity that made Harrison physically recoil. Don't you ever touch me again, Sydney hissed, the raw, unfiltered fury of 2 lifetimes finally bleeding into her voice. I know exactly what you are, Harrison. I know you planned to leave me at that underfunded clinic while you funded your mistress. I know you didn't care if your child died, as long as you got your hands on my grandmother's money. Harrison stared at her, entirely speechless. The woman sitting in front of him wasn't the meek, subservient wife he had systematically broken down over 3 years. She was a stranger. She was dangerous. The money is in an offshore trust, Sydney said, her voice dropping back to a terrifyingly calm whisper. You will never see a single cent of it. My lawyers will be delivering the divorce papers to your office by morning. They are filing for sole custody, backed by the evidence of your financial fraud and emotional abuse. You are going to leave this hospital right now, and if you ever try to contact me or my son again, Bradley will dismantle your life piece by piece until you have absolutely nothing left. Harrison opened his mouth to argue, to scream, to fight back, but the words died in his throat. He looked at Sydney's cold, unyielding face, and then down at the baby, who would never know him as a father. For the first time in his narcissistic life, Harrison realized he had completely lost. Get out, Sydney commanded, pointing toward the door. Defeated, humiliated, and utterly broken, Harrison pushed himself off the floor. He stumbled out of the luxurious hospital suite, walking past Bradley's disgusted glare, and stepped out into the harsh sunlight of the city, a man who had gambled his entire world for greed, and lost everything. The fallout of Harrison's spectacular downfall was swift, brutal, and thoroughly absolute. Within 48 hours of Sydney checking out of Cedars-Sinai, Harrison's carefully constructed world collapsed into a pile of worthless rubble. It started with the startup. The Miller investors, furious at being stood up for a critical funding meeting, conducted a sudden, rigorous audit of Harrison's company finances. What they found was a chaotic web of misappropriated funds and unpaid vendors. Harrison had been slowly draining the company's operating budget to maintain his lavish lifestyle, fully intending to replace the missing capital with Sydney's $85,000 before anyone noticed. Without her money to plug the hole, the fraud was exposed in glaring detail. The investors immediately pulled their backing and filed a massive lawsuit against him for corporate embezzlement. By Wednesday morning, Harrison was forcibly escorted out of his own office building by private security, clutching a cardboard box containing his meager personal belongings. He stood on the sidewalk, his tailored suit feeling suddenly heavy and ridiculous, as the reality of his impending bankruptcy crushed the breath from his lungs. He tried to call Vanessa. He needed a place to stay, a friendly face, someone to tell him he was still the brilliant, successful man he believed himself to be. The call went straight to voicemail. Desperate, he took an Uber to the upscale retail district where she was supposed to be signing the lease for her boutique. He found her standing on the sidewalk outside the vacant storefront, screaming at a real estate agent who was aggressively shaking his head and locking the glass doors. "Vanessa!" Harrison called out, jogging toward her. "V, thank God. Listen, things are bad right now, but I have a plan. We can figure this out." Vanessa spun around, her beautiful face contorted into a mask of pure venom. You have absolutely ruined me. The landlord leased the space to a corporate coffee chain because your wire transfer bounced. You lied to me, Harrison. You are completely broke." "I just need a little time," Harrison pleaded, reaching out to touch her arm. "My wife. She stole the money back, but I'm fighting her in court. We just need to lay low." Vanessa slapped his hand away so hard the sound echoed off the brick buildings. "Are you actually insane? Your wife's lawyers sent me a cease and desist letter this morning, threatening to sue me for receiving stolen marital assets. You are toxic, Harrison. You are a poor, pathetic liar, and I never want to see your face again." She turned on her expensive heels and marched down the street, leaving Harrison standing entirely alone on the bustling sidewalk. Meanwhile, Sydney was sitting in the sun-drenched sunroom of Bradley's sprawling estate, sipping hot herbal tea while her newborn son, Leo, slept peacefully in a bassinet beside her. The dark, suffocating shadows of her previous life felt like a distant, fading nightmare. Her high-powered divorce attorney, a sharp woman named Eleanor, sat across the glass table, sliding a thick stack of finalized legal documents toward Sydney. "It's over, Sydney," Eleanor said, a satisfied smile on her face. "Harrison signed the papers this morning. He didn't even put up a fight. Between the investor lawsuit and the evidence of his infidelity, no judge in the state would have given him a dime, let alone custody. You retain full ownership of your inheritance. The house will be sold with all profits going to you to cover his marital debts, and you have sole physical and legal custody of Leo." Sydney picked up the pen, her hand completely steady. She looked down at the signature line. In her past life, she had bled out on a cold, sterile table, a victim of her husband's monstrous greed. She had died, terrified, heartbroken, and completely powerless. But the universe had given her a second chance. She had taken that chance and forged it into a weapon of absolute justice. Sydney pressed the pen to the paper and signed her name with a bold, beautiful flourish. She set the pen down and looked out the window at the vibrant green gardens, feeling the warm sunlight on her face. She was free. She was wealthy. She was safe. And most importantly, she was a mother. As she gently reached out to stroke baby Leo's soft cheek, Sydney smiled. Her revenge was complete, but her real life, her beautiful, unwritten future, was just beginning. Did Sydney's incredible journey of rebirth and ultimate revenge leave you completely breathless? If you loved seeing this fiercely protective mother turn the tables on her toxic husband and his greedy mistress, do not forget to hit that like button. Share this jaw-dropping story with your friends who love a perfect karma moment, and make sure to subscribe to our channel for more thrilling, real-life drama stories every single week. Ring the bell so you never miss an update.